Hey everyone, it's hashtag Malkin Live. As you know, for about the last 5 or 6 weeks, I have been employing this live stream technology more while I'm still on this platform. Of course, I was one of the earlier adopters of Twitter. I've been on for about 12 years now, and I've seen it all coming. And it is coming to a head, of course, every single day. Patriots, nationalists, Trump supporters, conservatives, anyone from the center right to the dissident right, every single day has to anticipate that they will be pushed off of this platform for the mildest of transgressions. And of course, transgression has been redefined by the Twitter overlords over the course of its existence. And this is the perfect time to have a very epic panel. I'm going to bring him in right away because none of them need an introduction. We've got Katie Hopkins. Hi, Katie.
Hi, thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's a thrill to have you on. David Vance. Hi, David.
Hi, Michelle. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for being here. And Amy Mek. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Good, good. Now, we all have our stories of being throttled, censored, squelched. But Katie, we have to start with you because yours is the freshest, of course, and one of the most high profile recently. This just happened. So tell us about this. The news all broke. When was it? Last Friday?
I think so. I mean, I lose track myself. And I would say, secondly, I was informed about my removal by the mainstream media. Twitter kindly went first to the BBC, to CNN, The Guardian, and others to tell them I'd been permanently suspended before even I knew about it. So that was nice of them. They also did it as a sort of a gift to mark 1.1 million followers that I'd finally achieved, despite what we know is a tough gig to try and accumulate followers as a conservative. The way that they marked that event was to remove me from the platform. So I think, it's just one of those things where we no longer need to talk about the transgressions that get you removed from Twitter. That's not really the case. It is just your level of influence. When you have sufficient influence to be more problematic than you're allowed to be, that's when your final day comes. So I'm off of Twitter, but I don't regret being on Twitter, and I'm delighted to see so many people follow across to Parley. And I'm incredibly grateful to Amy and David for their support over this time, particularly, messages from David on Twitter saying, Katie's my friend. If you don't want to be around her, don't follow me. And that sort of, you don't get that kind of support from within our own side very often. So you guys are a really special crowd to me, and I just wanted to say that.
Yes, for sure. There has to be strength in numbers, and I have been crusading on the behalf of a lot of people who've been deplatformed, whether they're very high profile or, to the speech squelchers, the so-called low-hanging fruit. So many people who can't fight back and who don't have a voice.
If I could say something about that, Michelle
yes.
I think you, of any conservative in America that I know, have put your reputation on the line so many times for people who very few people know about, and you have run to their defense even when the mainstream conservatives label them as controversial. You've kind of refused to not that guilty by association, that all of a sudden if you spend any time with anybody, you have to believe every single thought that person believes in. You have literally been the most just strong crusader. And I know for me personally, you, Katie, David, the three of you have always been such huge supports to me. So thank you. I appreciate you. My family appreciates you. So I would be remiss if I didn't say that.
Well, there's a lot of love here. It's a huggy moment for sure. And Amy, I want you to fill in a little bit for people, because it's been now more than 2 months since you were suspended for a dozen tweets.
Well, they've wanted me to take down 12 tweets again, which is just a trap. I think, as we all know, when they want you to constantly be taking tweets down, it's their way of putting you on a list that it's going to be too many, and then your platform's going to be gone. And at some point, it's, we're in this thing that we're beholden to places like Twitter. And that's why it's beautiful to have Parler now to people to go to. But I think the scary thing about that is that if we leave platforms like Twitter, where Trump also desperately needs that kind of independent that he's able to reach in that platform, it's, as conservatives, we're always not staying and fighting to get back on these platforms. And I think that Trump's executive order tried to get us kind of back into that fight. And these platforms have to no longer be labeled as platforms and need to be now categorized as media companies, because they're getting protections that they shouldn't be getting, and people aren't able to sue on their platform, on these platforms like you can on a regular media company. So I think getting behind Trump's executive order, I'm still waiting for, you know, the GOP to get behind him and get us all back on Twitter, which I don't know will ever happen.
Oh, well, we'll be waiting a long time. Isn't that the problem? And before President Trump issued the executive order, it had almost become a joke, right? Because he had used the phrase, the infamous phrase now, that he was monitoring the situation, right? And we can sit here and watch all of the Senate Republican crap weasels tweet about how unjust this is, or we can do something about it. And I think that's what the impetus is for going to places like Parler or Gab or Telegram. David, you can see how, you know, it is a tricky cost benefit calculation. And, you know, I've had to face this pretty much every single day now for the last, I started 12 years ago, and then it was clear to me by 2012 that shadow banning and follower suppression counts and the algorithms had already been launched 8 years ago. I saw it because effective, and this is what Katie was getting at too, right? It's about being effective. It's not really about the content, right? They'll use whatever pretext it is to throttle people who are effective. But it was clear 8 years ago. And so then the question is every single day, well, do I stay or do I go? What is that in that Rolling Stone song, right? Should I stay or should I go now, right?
That's who it was. The English rock punk band, The Clash.
Thank you, The Clash. Yes.
Should I go? Very important. We get our.
Yes, I know.
So, yeah, I mean, the thing about it is that, you know, where did it all go wrong on Twitter is one of the ways I look upon it, and I think from the early beginnings back in 2010, 2009, whenever I went on it first, where it all went wrong was 2016. That's when it went wrong. Because in 2016, the fact is that not just Twitter, but actually all big tech companies, these faux platforms, but they're all publishers. The strength and the effectiveness of all of you folks here and others as well got Trump into the White House. It got the UK out of the European Union. So that was a golden moment. And it was the death knell simultaneously, in my view, for the value of for Twitter being what it had been, Michelle. You know, it changed forever, and it's taken a couple of years for it to become so blindingly obvious. But I mean, just if you look around this panel, Katie chased off it, Amy essentially taken from it. I mean, I'm hanging on in some strange way, but I know my days are, you know, there's a target on my back. I know that. And actually, Amy, I've had all the little, you've got to remove this tweet, you've got to do this, as the enemy go back over, in my case, 200,000 tweets. I mean, God almighty, how do they do that? I'm impressed they can find.
They wake up every morning thinking of ways to destroy us, right?
So, they're
at war.
Yeah, well, that's the reality of it. And so therefore, you know, I think that the world has changed dramatically in the past couple of years. And when things change, you have to change. And so I think for us, it's really important we bed together in this one. We stand united. And I also think, you know, final point I would say is we have to use, you know, we have to fight the war on as many fronts as we're able to fight the war. Once you're taken off Twitter, though, you know, like, for example, how do you fight on Twitter? You can't, because you're gone. So
Right.
that's the shocking, awful reality of 2020. And this being the election year, I mean, it's dead obvious what the big tech guys are after. They want to stop at all costs Trump getting back, lest he do the thing that you said, Amy, lest the executive of order becomes manifest. And if it doesn't,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. So Katie, I've noticed that there are a lot of now many of your followers and fans who are continuing to carry the torch for you on Twitter. This is a good thing, right? And I think this is what Amy's getting at, and I agree with her too, which is for those of us who, for whatever reason, and David, as you say, I'm the same way, hanging by a thread. I was temporarily suspended a couple of weeks ago for echoing President Trump, who had been throttled for his tweet saying that violent criminal looters should be shot. And I had to struggle to make this decision to go ahead and delete the tweet so I could get back on. As soon as I got back on, I redoubled and did a live stream saying, yeah, I don't regret a single thing I said. And I repeated everything I said. So would your advice to the folks who are, do you have is there a name because Beyonce has the Hive? Is there a Katie Hopkins nickname for your followers?
Well, we were always they self-named themselves the Hopkins Army.
Okay, and there you go. There you go.
My plea to anybody, even people who hate me, but can see the relevance of having different opinions and allowing them, great stuff. Get on Twitter, stay on Twitter. Get on Twitter and do more videos. Say less, write less, videos. It is much harder for Twitter to censor video content than it is for them to censor words. Yeah. And that's where they're struggling. The smartest advice is to stay on Twitter, push Parler, push other platforms, but do it in video content because they are very much struggling to try to censor that. The second point I quickly wanted to make in the briefest of terms is we need on our side, as us four, I think, are trying to demonstrate through actions, extreme discipline now. We have to be able to support each other and not call each other out if we disagree or disagree with someone's behaviors. We can do that in private. That doesn't need to be an online conversation. We need extreme discipline on our side. And the second thing is this move out, this push out, get off this, get off that, get off MSM, get off Twitter, is also replicated physically. People are on the move. My Jewish friends are on the move to Israel. Christian families are looking eastward to Poland and others. In America, Californians are hopping. Texas is turning color. We are physically, as well as online, on the move. And there will come a point, both online and in physical sense, where we will need to make that stand. And South Africans are doing it now. South Africans are down to the last 4% of whites. They are going to make a final last stand. And there will come a point where we have to do the same. I don't know where that's going to take us yet. I don't know what it looks like yet. I can estimate that in the UK alone, 20 to 30 million people are politically homeless. We need to give people a place to go. I don't know what our Israel is, either in the physical or the online sense, but we do need to create an online Israel. And I mean that in the Jewish and non-Jewish sense. So we will find where that is. At the moment, we're taking steps. Parler is a step. But I believe eventually we will make a stand together somewhere where all opinions are welcome, not just conservatives, and we can relearn the art of debate. So a long answer there, but I think important one in terms of where we're headed directionally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can I just add very briefly, since Katie went off, was taken off Twitter, I've seen more people with your face in their profile, Katie, than ever before. There are legions of Katie all over Twitter. God bless your souls. Your print is still there.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. When I had typed in Katie Hopkins, the handle, there were dozens of your faces. It's amazing. It's right.
Oh, bless them. Well, David and Amy and you have been, as we all know, each of us individually, our supporters really do like our path. And whenever there's a moment where you are properly kicked in the gut, you know, whether they take your house, your job, come for your children, whatever, your head, it's you guys that go, it's going to be okay. You can do this. Amy was right there. And that's what I think what the message we're trying to say to anybody that might be listening to this is, you're not on your own. Never feel alone. We are all here, and there are millions. You can't hear them, you can't see them, but we're here, and we, us four, are backing you. And it doesn't matter if you're disinvited from things, uninvited, left off the list. We are backing you, and we won't back down.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I think we need more people who are willing to join that fight and put their face out there, because right now, I don't know about where you guys are, but I mean, if you have the Trump flag that I have everywhere, it puts your life at risk now. When you have people from mainstream left-wing organizations saying if they see a Trump hat, it's a white supremacist hat. We're in scary times, and what's happening is people are getting more and more and more silent because they're scared for their families, for their livelihoods. And the only way that's going to stop is if collectively everybody says, enough. We're going to be proud. We're going to be out there. We're okay with putting on our Trump flags out, or telling you we're conservatives. And, it's at the point where people's jobs and livelihoods, they're being taken away. And, we need more people who are willing to, when this is happening to individuals like the four of us try our hardest to do to so many out there struggling, we have to get behind people, or they can't do it on their own. So I think that call to action, we're asking people, sign up, join our platforms so we can put out these action calls to people, and we can, they're going to, as you said, those sign up lists are more important now than ever. So we can do calls to action to people to help support people in individual communities who have no one.
I want to key off on a point that David made about how things are much different than they were when Twitter was first launched. And I started out my online career in 1999. Actually, I built a clunky website, which was my eponymous website name, michellemalkin.com, on Microsoft front page. That predated even blogging software. Then we had the advent of all of these registrar companies like GoDaddy and Network Solution and such. And back then you could plant your flag, and I've talked about this, you could plant your flag on the internet frontier and never worry that the actual domain would disappear.
Yes.
But that is the case now. And VDARE has been threatened. Network Solutions said that they violated their hate policy, and now they have to either go to the dark web or Tor or find another registration solution. And then a friend of mine, Ann Corcoran, who has a fantastic website and blog that had been around for more than a decade called Refugee Resettlement Watch, had her blog unplugged by WordPress last summer. And she was able to reconstruct the entire archive and find a free domain host. But if you are high profile, like any of us, there are massive security issues. Your domain will be constantly under attack. And it was what happened to Anne that led me to move my entire blog, even though it had been solo independent for at least since 1999, to uns.com, that there might be safety in a bigger umbrella. But of course, their domain registrar could pull them tomorrow. I can't post my articles that are posted on uns on Facebook because Facebook decided that uns was a hate site. So this is very black pilling, because we can create an online Israel, as Katie puts it.
Right.
But where's the where's the protection that the powers that be might just decide tomorrow to go after Parlay for whatever reason, Katie?
Yeah.
Well, that's entirely possible that could happen, Michelle. I mean, I can remember my online history goes back to about 1999 as well, actually.
Yeah, we're old timers.
We're veterans is the word. And,
okay, that's better.
And I can remember back in about 2005 when I remember being very, very critical of the Iranian regime back then, long time ago now, but even back then. And this, I was hosted by Squarespace.com. Squarespace.
Oh, yeah.
They basically deplatformed me because pressure was put on them by those fun-loving Iranian mullahs, and off I had to toodle to another platform.
Yeah.
And all these years later, you know, and Katie, this is very relevant for us Brits. I mean, my altnewsmedia.net channel, it's hosted in the States because I daren't have it hosted in our, you know, totalitarian-esque United Kingdom because it would be also taken down. So, you know, it's a real battle we're all in, be it in the States, be it in the UK, where just to have the very ability to talk and comment and influence, it's never been more under greater threat.
Right.
I think it's true. I also think, you know, the truth and I think the reality for many people who still have a job and are employed and have a mortgage, so they have a loan out against their house, is they cannot put their head up above the parapet. In the UK, it's been perfectly demonstrated to everybody. If you do that, we will take your job, we will take your home. And most families with children, wife, and cannot afford to do that. So I don't think we can ask more people to put their heads above the parapet unless they work for themselves. And
Yes.
Interestingly, having had some off-the-record conversations with the gentleman who flew the White Lives Matter banner over the Etihad Stadium, the reason the gentleman who was actually behind that was able to do that was because he works for himself. Nice. And is sick and tired and had finally got to that flip point that we've all been through a long time ago, where you say, enough, I cannot take this anymore. And that's what he did. So I think what it is about is if you work for yourself and you haven't got a house and a family, it's possible to put your head above the parapet, but we need to find a mechanism for people to help support those of us who are front facing in order that we can take the punches willingly and happily. We'll look after each other, but the people who want to support us can do that more effectively.
Yes, exactly. I want to mention before I forget the role of these NGOs and nonprofits. And of course, on your side of the pond, you've got groups like Hope Not Hate and your versions of the SPLC. Amy, in your particular case with your Twitter suspension, you've mentioned this group called Equality Labs. What is that?
So Equality Labs is another Hope Not Hate left-wing organization that's popped up. The beautiful thing is it's always the same people. It's just amazing how they spring up in different areas, because right on that list with Equality Labs was also, they do a lot of work in the UK, was also CARE and every other left-wing radical organization. And what they're doing now is they lobbied Twitter, and they basically made it that anybody who used the term coronavirus jihad was going to be banned from their platform, right?
Yeah.
So, and what happened was that you had a very large, I guess, Islamic gathering in India that from this sparked the largest outbreak. I mean, this was said in Al Jazeera. This was said in every left-wing publication. The same thing I did. But instead, it's when somebody is willfully spreading coronavirus, knowing they're infected, that to me is bioterrorism. I mean, you're using something to spread something at the time that everybody was thinking was going to be deadly. And this outbreak happened, and Equality Labs got on this platform, and they lobbied Twitter, they lobbied Facebook, they lobbied YouTube, they lobbied Google, everybody under the sun. And anybody who was saying this phrase was banned. So the power happened that Twitter is taking commands from hard left organizations. And I mean, the proof is right there. And again, that's okay. If that's what they want to do, they can do that. Just like the New York Times, just like Fox News, they can be media outlets, but they can't be platforms that are, the platform. It's the example of us on this phone call right now. they're not being held accountable for anything we say. All of a sudden, this live feed is not going to go dead. If Michelle and I say something negative and somebody wants to sue me for slander, great. They're not going to go after the platform we're on. We have to be able to go after them. Right now, they're getting that protection. They're only supposed to be a disseminator. They're supposed to be there to facilitate something, but they're acting as political. They're imposing their political beliefs on all of us. And at that point, we should be able to have them labeled as media companies. So, it's this problem. Nobody in the GOP right now is bringing this and fighting for this for us, and we're all getting shut down. But Michelle, I want to go back real quick to what you were just saying about the platforms, about the hosts. I have somebody who works for Rare Foundation, and he's had a blog for 15 years, Vlad Tepes blog. He was gone for a day. He came home. They shut down his blog. He had no idea what was going on. He called GoDaddy. GoDaddy basically said to him, "We're sorry. You are off the platform." That's it. They basically gave him 24 hours after him fighting to remove and to get his platform hosted somewhere else, even though he had this contract. I mean, this is now illegal. How can they do that? How can they just shut down someone's site like that when they've paid for this service? So this is now happening. I mean, when I heard this with GoDaddy, I got my site immediately off of there. I would have never thought. So, this is getting scary, and the only person talking about this is Trump, and he can't do it on his own.
Well, and he's talking. That's the issue. We've got a toothless executive order. We've got Senate Republicans, and I mean, we've got a handful of House Republicans who are pushing on the issue, right. But absent all that, really the only battleground left is legal. In the courtroom. Is there anything like that taking place on your side of the ocean, Katie and David?
David, I'm going to say no.
No.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
No.
Yeah.
No. And I think I think there is some positives to be had from this. So in the absence of action and in the absence of legal action, the positives that I see are that we don't go away. So the annoying thing for anybody that's silencing us or trying to silence us is we don't seem to go away. We are like those, that game where you whack a mole,
yes,
and then it pops up somewhere else.
Right.
We are effectively all moles. Yeah. Global game of whack-a-mole. And so while Jack is busy whacking moles, and I can't help but look at David's head at this point and think it's perfect for the mole example.
I'm so offended by that. Katie Hopkins.
But my point is, we are still popping up. And in the absence of, hold on, I've got to go that way, haven't I? In the absence of a solution, the thing we have to keep doing in the interim is popping up. The other thing we have to keep doing is reminding people they're not on their own to come with us, because we're not going away. And the other very positive thing to come out of this next wave of craziness and wildness, whether it's BLM, statues coming down, Chaz, whatever. The positive is that the contrast between the darkness and the light, good and evil, is becoming more stark. So there is a much clearer, as we go into November, the decision is much clearer and is increasingly less, I believe, about Republicans and Democrats, and more about, do you want to be with the lightness or do you want to be with the darkness? Do you want to go with good or do you want to follow the path of evil? And even at a more physical level, because I'm all about the physical, because I think it's the most easy to communicate. Do you want to go with rebuild, restart, reopen, invest, or do you want to go with rip down, burn, destroy, undo? And I think that is how we still push forward with our messaging. We want rebuild, reopen, restart. We don't want rip down, undo. And that's what this election, to me, needs to start to be talking about. That's the messaging I want to see coming out of Trump HQ pretty soon.
I think there's another point to be made. The reason that they're so enthusiastic to shut us down is because they fear us. They actually fear the messages that we send and the influence that we wield. They fear that. So we should remember that that's actually an asset we have. Yeah, we're made to suffer for it, but they do fear that. And the other thing is, I think all of us have demonstrated. It's important to be just absolutely resolute. It doesn't matter, Katie. They knock you over here like the proverbial whack-a-mole, and you pop up there. You will not submit. You won't bend the knee, and you won't ever, you won't give them what they want. So it's that attitude. And again, going back to something you said, Michelle, about them coming for you. Well, I think it's never been more obvious exactly that they're coming for all of us right now. Statues torn down in London. We see what's happening in the States. It's unbelievable. It's the hard Marxist left wanting a revolution, using Black Lives Matter as their pretext. But they want a revolution, and November will decide it.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I want to go back to that White Lives Matter banner because I just read, and I don't know if you've all commented on this already, that the girlfriend refused to undergo racial sensitivity training.
Yeah.
Good for her. That's called resistance, right?
Right.
I don't know if any of you all have had to be subjected to that, but when I worked in corporate media, even way back in the late 1990s, it was just dreadful. It was dreadful. So she is out of work now as well, which I guess is liberating, right? That's Katie. That's what you were saying.
Yes. Yeah, there is something about that. So she is one of the group of individuals involved, but because she was only tenuously linked to someone who's tenuously linked to the banner, immediately she was removed from her position. Her employers did that typical thing of putting out this statement about, we believe in this and that, and we want to save the planet, and Greta Thunberg's amazing, and Black people are fabulous, or whatever the statement said.
Right.
And so she was removed. But I think very shortly she'll see, she will be refunded because there will be filming done around that group of individuals very soon, and people can help donate to them. So I admire her for not going through that training. And I think just quietly working behind the scenes in the last couple of days has just been about trying to help them just get through the initial media mobbing of their homes, their family, their friends, their parents, people being fired. We know this stuff, but trying to help people take a moment to themselves, to breathe the fresh air, to go and stand in a car park and remember not everybody's online. These are the things that we can help other people with to try and cope with the mob when it turns on them. They're just physical, practical things we know about. So I've been doing that. But from my personal point of view, yes, and no longer having a job, which I hate to say because I've always worked since I was 14 in the Wimpy as the burger girl. No longer having a home. They came with litigation and took my home. No longer owning anything, no longer having a bank account, no longer having any savings or anything they can take has actually been the most liberating thing of all and very freeing. I don't recommend it to anybody else.
Right.
But there is not a day where I don't look around and realize, amazingly, I don't know how. I would say I pay him, but clearly I don't have fun. And amazingly, I still have my children, and they've also come for them as well, reporting them to social services. Recently, we had them back trying to say I abuse my children. So when they come for everything, the liberating thing is you are very, very free. And I possibly am one of the freest people, but it's why I understand why when you've got a mortgage and they come for your job, you're in danger of losing, your marriage, your children, your everything. And it becomes very dark. And it's why, in some ways, what they really want is to see people like me, you, swinging from a tree. And even then they don't stop. And the funny thing, of course, is we know well, if I were to start swinging from a tree, they'd all be on that delete button pretty fast.
Yes.
And that's the lack of integrity on their side, is if you're going to make me kill myself, stand by what you said. And they wouldn't. And I won't kill myself either.
Right.
Yes. Amen. Amy, you've gone through the same thing too. And you know, it's not just the NGOs, it's also these specific supposed journalism or organizations that are masquerading as arbiters of truth when they really are just political operatives and hitmen. And you know, and it's not just the New York Times. It's in your case, it's the Huffington Post. Well,
the New York Times did something too. Actually, I think they all did something at some point. Yeah. But you know, it's interesting because as I'm listening to Katie, I think a lot of people used to say to me back when I came on social media, why was I so obsessed with reporting on what was going on in Europe and kind of trying to bridge that gap between America and Europe? Because I would watch what was happening years ago back then to people like Katie, to people like Tommy Robinson, to, you know, just the list goes on and on and on, with people in the UK, with people in Germany and France, that their families were being hunted and they were losing, I mean, their children, everything. They were being smeared and maligned and taken out of their jobs. And I used to warn people, this is coming to America. This is coming. And, you know, I think the natural inclination is for people to say, well, it's not going to happen to me. You know, Katie's so extreme. Michelle's so over the top. David, oh, you know, like everybody else, there's something wrong with them, but not them. It wouldn't happen to them. Yeah. And, you know, so again, I would always report on this. And the irony is then pretty much, I think the first kind of case where they did this, you know, just hit piece on me and went after every one of my family members. Pretty much what they did to me was what they've been doing in Europe all along. However, it was kind of the first time it was done here. So then what happened was the same logic of the mainstream conservatives here kicked in. Well, she talks about jihad. Well, she talks about Sharia. Meanwhile, you know, you have Pamela Geller and you have Robert Spencer, who had been banned for years from the UK, that nobody ever paid any attention because, again, they want to label them as extreme. So, you know, for me, when this happened, I knew the magnitude of what was about to happen because I was so tuned into Europe. However, I didn't think the amount of people would be so scared for themselves to be associated with me, with anybody. And all of a sudden, as normal, everybody has to denounce you. Well, you know, I don't know her. I don't that, you know, it was this. Everybody became very scared that this is going to happen to them next. And that's the main way that they win, because the number one thing that stuck out in my head when I was attacked like that was I had people say, you know what, I'm so proud of you for being brave, keep fighting, but I can't have this happen to my family. And I get it. And I understand that. But what we are at the point now is it's happening to everybody. We saw it happen with the children. What was the case out in DC with the young boys who the
Covington Catholic.
Oh, sorry.
We saw it. We're seeing it happen in every arena. People are getting fired. Police officers can't even say all lives matter without getting fired. It's happening across the spectrum, and no longer will your silence protect you. So it's at the point now where, listen, if you can't be as out there as we all are, there are other ways to support this movement. And there's other ways to support, and there has to, at least within your families, be brave enough to have these conversations, because, you know, we're so divided. And the divide is no longer we disagree with each other. It's come to the point where we have to destroy each other. And conservatives don't do that. We like to have debate, where the other side, if we don't recognize, is at war with us. So it's getting scary. So yeah, they
absolutely are at war with us, Amy. You're dead right. And you know that's the thing. If we think that we want to use reason and rationale and logic and all those things, they don't care about those things. You know, metaphorically, tearing down statues is what they want to do with us, with our heritage, with our values, with everything. Right. They just don't care. And I don't think that the left in particular, everywhere now, not just the UK, US, it's so obvious, they've never been as feral one of those words
Right.
you use at your peril on Twitter. They've never been
Right.
more feral.
Feral.
Than they are
Yeah.
now.
Right.
Feral in plain sight, violent, destruction. Like Katie said earlier, the choice couldn't be more clear. It's like something I said when I started Alt News Media, my channel. It's not about right, right versus left. It's about right versus wrong.
Exactly.
It's a simple choice. It should unite good people of whatever particular views against the nihilists and the destructors.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have this strange configuration in politics, and I want to know if this is the same thing in Britain, where you have many of the establishment left, the social justice warriors on the left, who collaborate with establishment Republicans, Open Borders Incorporated Republicans, swamp creatures. And obviously, this very conflict plays out inside the Oval Office every single day. We finally had this triumph of expanding the immigration ban to include temporary foreign workers who are undermining the native-born workforce here. But it was a struggle, right? It should have been day one from the time that the so-called ban was announced, in the interest of protecting the American workers in the pandemic era. But we had to work for the last 8 weeks to get where Trump was when he campaigned in 2016. So this is this massive frustration to have, gotten this man into office whose instincts are all about America first and the kind of muscular nationalism that is taking hold across the world. And yet there's still this massive vacuum among the Republican Party apparatchiks themselves. How do you solve that? I mean, how do we fix this? And obviously this must be a problem on your side as well.
I'm going to look to David. Hold on.
You go first, Katie.
I'm looking to you.
Yes, Katie.
I jump in. We've got the same almost identical scenario. We've got fundamentally spineless politicians in Westminster who are quite happy to seek kind of a happy arrangement with the leftists in the opposition party. It's a homogenous, spineless mess we've got with no leadership, basically. So that's one of the problems, and therefore what happens is politics in the UK continually drifts further and further to the left, salami sliced bit by bit. It just drifts right over, and to the point where, honestly, is there any difference between the parties here, Katie? I say no.
No, I think not. And I think in terms of that infiltration or the right working with those who are working against us, the really good example is with coronavirus. Boris Johnson completely emasculated by coronavirus. I don't know how that happened. I never heard that a side effect of coronavirus was that you lost your testicles. But that is exactly what happened. And he kept saying, right, what we're going to do is, hold on, but with worse hair. What we're going to do is, this is my Boris question, we're going to follow science. Oh God, I look like a drunk Janine Kiro. We're going to follow the science. And of course, the idea of that sounds very good because people like someone in a white coat. We trust the doctor. If my kid's sick, I want you to help me. But the truth of it is, of course, the science is actually the intelligence arm of the left wing. They are far left, hard left. So you can say you're following the science, but the science turns out to be about as unreliable as my dyslexic 10-year-old is at spelling. And the science turned out to be left-wing, militant left-wing. And so, of course, what happened is Boris, with his emasculation and his tiny raisin balls, was driven over to the left by these militant scientists who are Remainers at best and at worst part of the Marxist cult. So that, to me, is what's gone on. That was a little bit more dramatic than David's interpretation. So I'll Katie, I
don't have the hair to do it.
You don't have any hair to do it. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the cringe reflex. We've had Ted Cruz here posting pictures of George Floyd with angel wings. We had many of these Republican politicians, and to an extent, even President Trump himself, doing what they can to, somewhat flex the knee to Black Lives Matter, which is a domestic terrorist organization. And as good as President Trump has been on Twitter in tweeting in capital letters about law and order, it's really only within the last week that, at least at the federal level in DC, that they've mounted any kind of defense of every last monument and statue. Trump promised us that he was going to declare Antifa a domestic terrorist organization. That hasn't happened yet. And in the meantime, the kinds of things that happened to Amy, the kinds of things that we're threatened with. And, I think we're going to have to add a new phenomenon to the category, Katie. Your plight just reminds me, it's not just about deplatforming. It's not just about debanking. It's dehoming.
Yes.
Dehoming,
yes.
which is now a new threat that we all face. And so who's protecting us? I mean, and Trump is the best that we've gotten in, at least for as long as I've been covering politics in America.
Yeah. Well, I think it's scary that you're saying that, because I think after what happened with me and my family, I started to reach out to any situation I would see where somebody's family was under attack.
Yes.
I would start calling. And I mean, what scared me was that I was the only person calling. There was no one else. And,
Yes.
I would try to get these people to put their stories down in writing, so at least we could get it out there. But at that time, when people are in shock, they want to hide, they want it to go away, and they want to apologize, which you can never do. And, it's I think the thing you're bringing up is Robert Spencer just wrote something amazing in Front Page about this, where he said, and I could hear his exhaustion in this because he's been fighting for so many years, where he said, I've already conceded there's no one I can turn to. There's no one I can ask. And I thought to myself, you know what, I am so blessed, because I at least have in my time been able to turn to a Katie, turn to a Michelle, turn to a David. There's people out there who have stood with me, who've gone through the same thing, who can build me up, who can, who understand. But the truth of the matter is, everyone else we're all under attack. So we're doing the best to keep our own selves together while trying to also be that strength to other people. So I think you're bringing up such an important point, because, that was kind of the facade that I had before all of this happened. Oh, it's different in America. So many people will be coming running, will come running to help. And I'm not going to name them, but there was a very mainstream conservative paper that when everything happened to me, basically was like, well, you know what, we can concede she's a terrible person, but what happened to her family, maybe they shouldn't have gotten the swastikas, maybe they shouldn't have had, come after their careers.
Right.
And I'm sitting here but wait, and they start quoting everything that this other left-wing hit piece against me. And I was saying, but you guys never called me. How about somebody talk to me? And it was and I kind of think it's ironic, because now they're under attack. And, but my point being in all of this is, nobody is standing together on our side the way we need to. And if we would unite, and we would have the mainstream people, and we would have all of us, and then we could go to our legislators, because we can't expect them to do everything while we sit at home and do nothing. Mm-hmm. We need to band together. We need to propose some sort of legislation. We need to lobby these people ourselves and demand, you're in office, we want to see your work. And if you don't, you're not going to be reelected. So, and that goes into the other issue of how they attack people who get into politics. So it's this cycle where if we don't start somewhere, and I think if we don't come together, we're in trouble, because there is no one to turn to.
I think the really interesting thing, and I so know what I think we all know, but that tactic they use where they're like, oh, I'm going to be on the side of the right. I mean, obviously, Katie's an asshole, and here's the worst
Yes,
quote
yes.
never find. She's got a fat ass, she's got a big nose, she looks like a horse face, but I'm on her side, and you're like, hey, if that's kind of friendship,
Right, go.
Exactly.
That's all of them, and we see right through that crap. But what I would say, using my Crayola pen, because that's the level of mentality I have, when we started off, and let's just take me as an example, because I'm an egotistical twat. No, there's just me here. And so the best thing you can do to get away and look after yourself and keep your mainstream media job and stay on the BBC is get on this side. And so that's what everybody does. Everyone goes down there, and it feels like you're all alone, you're isolated. What's happening now, and it is changing, is that center axis, that pivot point is changing. Because over here now is not just me or Michelle or Amy or David or Carpe or whomever else. This side of rejects is getting larger and louder, and the smartest of us who've been around for the longest and who've seen all the people who pretend to be on your side or who pretend to be your friend in private but won't acknowledge you in public, we're calling them out too. And the people who are left over on this side, people that pretend to be from free speech, or people who still are on Twitter saying, well, I'm going to stick in the rules, so I'll be okay. They can see that where they actually need to be, because soon it's going to be the power base is over here with us. And that is that the people who are left trying to defend their space on Twitter, and I want everyone to stay on there, but if they think they can stay there, they know they can't. And they're going to be looked after by us and whatever disciplined unit we can form. David?
Yeah, no, I'm completely agree on that point. It's a really good point, Katie. And one of the things about Parler, which is by no means a panacea, but again, it's a front in a war, it's been remarkable to see in a very short space of time the numbers of really good people, good, intelligent, smart people who have jumped. So, particularly Katie, following what happened to you, there's been just so many people coming across. Now, you can't sort of you can't be sure that everybody is as pure as the driven snow, but a lot of them, I think, do recognize that they're coming for all of us. It's that simple. So we may as well try and find ways to bond together. And this is where the left are really good at this. I'll give them credit for this.
Yeah.
They know how to network, organize, even in Seattle. Well, maybe not in Seattle, actually. That's not the right example. But they know to do it. They've got that kind of instinct. We, because we're so individual, don't have that instinct. It's not natural for us. But we have to absolutely do what I think we all believe in our hearts and in our minds, and that is we've got to find ways to work together, to hold together, to not submit together. This is what we have to do.
Yes.
And the thing is, honestly, time's running out for us, because I think in a very short period of time, the choice won't be there anymore. The choice will be taken, and we'll all be gone.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So one of the frustrations, having been inside the conservative establishment for, more than 2 decades, and then having been cast out of that, but then survived. And I think I just want to reiterate that point that Katie had brought up earlier. The best revenge, of course, is to persist. Mm-hmm. And we have all demonstrated in our own way that you can cancel culture. And sure, it may be a constant game of whack-a-mole, but they have to run, right? They have to chase us. That's one thing. But the problem is that in contemplating this idea of creating alternate support structures, there needs to be money, right? I mean, we have all the energy, the passion, the intellectual capital and all that, but you've got billionaires, and we're not just talking about Koch and Soros. The foundational donors of Conservatism Inc. are the ones who are creating the institutions that are collaborating with Huffington Post and Daily Beast and all of these SPLC knockoffs. And that is just, it is so daunting because we're not even talking about corporate media, universities, and Hollywood. Please convince me, my friends, that this is not just like a hopeless David and Goliath battle. Do we? I mean, how do we do this? And I want to say too that right now I started up a crowd fund for a man who made national news, international news last week. He took a stand at one of these statue protests. He was forced to defend himself with his weapon. He ended up shooting a man who had attacked him with a skateboard and other items. So the DA, who was Soros subsidized DA in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Amy, dropped the felony charges with regard to the shooting, but now they're just going to concoct something else. And what we've talked about here of the fact that normal people are not equipped to handle this. It's a complete onslaught. They're completely overwhelmed. They don't have the infrastructure and support that all of these leftist supposed victims who tore down the statue and went after the law-abiding people have. And, you know, in the last 2 days, we've raised $15,000. Meanwhile, the Antifa people have $150,000.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's just like, it is asymmetrical warfare. Help. What do we do?
It really is. And actually, there was something happened in London just 2 weekends ago, I think, where we had the mob rampaging through, trying to get to face the Churchill statue and and all that stuff. The actual people that were doing it, Katie, you probably have seen this. They were, even as the police, they were being some of them at any rate were being detained by the police. As they were being detained, they were being handed out cards with phone the solicitor to get help.
Lawyers.
So they basically can't lose, because even when they're arrested, there's instantly, literally, a get out of jail card.
Right.
And that's being funded as well. Solicitors tend not to work for free. So kind of same menacing problem we've got this side of the water as well. Is that right, Katie?
Yes.
I think go ahead, Katie.
Oh, no. Go on in.
Oh no, I'm just saying that what Michelle is saying is the mountain we're all climbing. And there's so many places that have needs. And, it's funny because I often think about this with, calls like this that we're having, that we need to have more conservative groups of people that come together, not necessarily on camera, and have these sorts of discussions of what different objectives we're going after. And, David touched on this earlier. I think a lot of times what happens with conservatives, we're type A personalities. We're used to being pushers on our own. And like the left, they, there isn't an ego in their war. There isn't people vying to be who's the most, who's going to be the most famous destructive person of all. So, with a lot of people, they've come over and it becomes a popularity thing versus a helping people thing. And they forget that. And, raising those funds, and Michelle, I give you so much credit going after these individual situations. That's really what the platform that I've been trying to build, hopefully we'll be releasing it soon, with our Rare, is we're trying to bring these people who are lawyers, who have different talents, that they're willing to donate their time to causes like this that can actually go and defend these people in their communities, because they're left alone. And as you said, $15,000 is nothing towards bailing these people out of prison. Don't tell me there's not conservative lawyers. They're just, a lot of people, it's coming to their homes now. It's coming to their communities, where I think if we start actually registering, getting people who are willing to donate legal time, people who will donate, a place for a meeting, etc. There are people out there. They just don't know who to turn to. They don't know how to reach a Michelle Malkin, how to reach a Katie and say, okay, you know what? Here, this is a cause you're pushing. Let me, unwilling to give money. We don't have a main platform where people can go to and find all of these different issues out. So I think that there are caring people out there. We just haven't brought them together yet. So that's my main goal now, is to, how can we find those people to help? So we'll see if it works.
Yeah.
I think there is, there's a sort of, and you're so right, that we recognize this trait within ourselves about being, yes, I'm perfectly fine, I can handle this is no problem. But when we soften that guard, and I guess it's why I spend a lot of time trying to be funny about myself, is when we soften that guard and allow other people in emotionally, there's a huge need for us to emotionally support other people who feel very isolated and alone. And especially right now, because so many older individuals, parents like myself, are being rejected by their own children, because of course they're on very different sides of this thing. So it becomes really emotionally lonely as well. And I think that's where we do offer hope. That's why people do follow us, often not for our political views, but just to hear a voice that sounds like something they might think, or something that sounds like common sense. So I think we have a really strong role to play there. We must never underestimate the value of that emotional connection we have with people. And that's, I think, I'm so grateful to those people on Twitter who feel that about my disappearance. And I think the second thing is, no, this isn't David versus Goliath. That there is absolutely hope that we win this. And I know that for sure, because if someone hurts themselves and falls on the floor, the simple choices you face are you're going to rush to pick them up. That's what we would do, and help them, get them a water, get them help. Or you can go and try and take from them. You could steal their wallet. You could kick them again. You could see if you can get their car keys. And it comes down to that. And ultimately, if you're always the person, even when you're tired and you're fed up and you feel like you just want to sit in your pajamas and cry about the state of your life, you still go and pick that person up. That's the only thing you need to know, is go back to the level of one. Are you trying to do the right thing? And if you can say, yes, you are Goliath, that you can face any Goliath, because David, and I don't mean Mr. Vance the mole, I mean a David who knows that they will always do the right thing is always going to beat a Goliath. And I believe that's true. At the level of one, we have signed up to try to do the right thing. And we will bring people like that with us. And it's a more of a biblical epic feeling. But I know that this fight on the side.
Well, as the literal David on this call.
Yes, you get the last word, David.
I do have to say that, that's right, Katie, what you're saying. I do think that, if you believe in what you do and you've got the passion for it, and I always say that it doesn't matter how awful a day you have, the next day the sun rises afresh, hope rises. So Michelle, to go back to what to the question you pose, yes, there's dark forces around, of course, and we're very aware of all of those, but there's also plenty of light around, and our job is to push as much light as we can into the darkness, and that's what we've got to keep doing.
Yes.
Amen.
Yes,
what a great way
David.
to end.
Yeah.
We've got to, let's see, I'm trying to see, how do we meet in the middle right there?
Oh, hold on there.
Oh, do this thing.
There we go. There we go. The Fantastic Four. Wow. This was so wonderful. Better than I could have ever dreamed of. It was so great. You all are such heroes to me. Amy Mek, David Vance, Katie Hopkins. I'm going to flash the Parley.
You can flash?
Yeah. Here we go.
Hooray.
Let's do that. Let's
do it.
Everybody.
Come on, David.
Next time. That'll be pay-per-view. Bye, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, David. Bye.